below 4,000 feet in altitude, Alpha India. Visual approach, number 1. Number 1, thank you. Triple 2 Sierra, number 1. No, 1862, chill out. 1862, shall we Sierra, thanks, sorry. 210 at dead knots.
Today we'll be looking at a radio story from the early 1990s which involved serious interference on air traffic control frequencies in the UK. There have often been reports in the past of pirate radio operators and the like interfering with emergency services and air traffic control frequencies. The DTI claim that this was in fact the case, but there are no specific stories or accounts on a time when a pirate station has indeed interfered with air traffic control frequencies, or at least not publicly. It's far less common to hear of intentional jamming on air traffic control services, but in the summer of 1994 it was reported that an elusive jammer was giving false instructions to aircraft operating in and out of some of the country's busiest airports, the main one being Manchester. Described as crackpots beaming hoax messages to packed jets in a newspaper story that broke around 1994, the culprit was rumoured to be travelling close to the airport and using an airband transceiver to give false instructions to aircraft approaching and departing Manchester. One pilot reported hearing the Charles Penrose song The Laughing Policeman repeatedly on the ground frequency, which led to the Laughing Policeman Wireless Society being suspected of causing the interference. This, however, was not the case. The society got the name by playing the song, as well as a spoof of the song Who's Afraid of the Big Bad Wolf, titled Who's Afraid of the DTI. The hoax transmissions were rumoured amongst the amateur radio community to be caused by a G7 station from Birmingham, but again this was unconfirmed and possibly nothing more than hearsay. The imposter was reportedly telling pilots to divert to different runways and even alternative airports, as well as playing music. Fortunately, none of the instructions were acted on because the pilots always double-checked the commands they were given. An investigation was launched by NATS, the service provider for the CAA, the Radio Communications Agency, which is now Ofcom, and the police. The NATS engineering team based at Swanwick have always taken every report of interference by a controller or pirate very seriously and investigate each case as thoroughly as possible. This started by listening to the recordings of the jammer and gathering data on where the interference is heard and what times of day. It was believed that the culprit was mobile, making him much harder to track down. Air traffic interference tracking is usually something the CAA do in close partnership with Ofcom, but they often conduct their own investigation to help narrow things down. The investigation was carried out both from the ground using a specially equipped van, or from the air using a Piper Chieftain aircraft modified for the role with an external antenna array. It was a simple case of measuring the strength and bearing of the transmission from multiple points until they could triangulate its location, and then the information was handed over to the Radio Communications Agency, who would ensure the interference was stopped. The RA carried out their own investigations from the ground using radio investigation vehicles equipped with sophisticated direction-finding equipment, typically a high-end receiver, a direction-finding device and an antenna array mounted in a car. Unfortunately, the jammer was never found and did eventually disappear. It's possible that the newspaper coverage of the incident spooked him and he decided to give up, especially with the potential punishment for doing that type of thing. Around this time there were reports of similar hoax transmissions around Newcastle, Heathrow and Luton airports, as well as instances of attacks against Radio Communications Agency officers whilst on surveillance duty. Around the same time all of this was taking place, the Aylesbury repeater bomb was discovered near GB3VA, leading to radio amateurs being given a bad name and creating quite a difficult time for the Radio Communications Agency. So that's the story of the Manchester Airport air traffic control jammer. Luckily he wasn't around for too long and didn't cause any serious incidents. Today the systems that Ofcom and NATS use are far more sophisticated and make tracking of this type of thing much easier and quicker, and the consequences for committing such a crime would almost certainly lead to imprisonment and heavy fines.
It's not below 4,000 feet altitude. It's not below 4,000 feet altitude, Alpha India.